Some records? Some records!
Some
Well, sometimes it takes a little help from an opera singer to get your point across. And that was my incredibly talented opera performing daughter, Ruby, who I am just over the moon proud of. So, yeah. Hi, it's Teddy coming to you from down in my record room with yet another vinyl orgy. And invited to this orgy are some incredible gifts and a focus on some newish releases, mostly from 2017 and maybe, one from the previous year. But let's get started with the gifts and a long, long overdue thank you to, well, you know him, you love him, BarakaPDub, Paul. He who brings so much valuable information to the conversation with dead wax information, mastering engineer information, pressing information. He delves into the dark territory of recorded oddities very bravely. Equipment reviews, record reviews, yes, all the above. He is awesome, and he is Paul. He is going to be linked down below. If you're not familiar with him, check him out. And let's check out what Paul sent. Yeah, it's very cool, and let's get to it. Well, first up, Paul. Come on, man, this is too much. But thank you. I mean, this is incredible. It's a 2011 Music Matters reissue of a 1957 Blue Note release by the great tenor man Johnny Griffin. It's called the Blowin Session. And yeah, Music Matters just really knows how to do it. I mean, inside and out, just impeccable treatment from the remastering to the packaging. This is the double 45 RPM release with the additional photos, laminated cover. It's just stunning. And can't say enough about the work that company has done. And I'll tell you, if there was ever an understatement of a title, an album title, you're looking at it. Because this could have been called the, in all caps, the Blowin Session, as this is as hard bop gets. Chicago tenor man Johnny Griffin, he had a reputation for being an incredibly fast player, and as the story goes here, he was on his way to the Rudy Van Gelder studio to the session when he literally bumped into John Coltrane and invited him to come along and join the other musicians booked at this session. A third tenor man, Hank Mobley, Lee Morgan on trumpet, Wynton Kelly on piano, Paul Chambers on bass, and Art Blakey on drums. Now just step back for a moment and let that wash over you and consider the creative energy that was in the room that day in the spring of 1957. And what you hope would happen is exactly what happened. Yeah, fireworks. I mean, this is essentially a jam session that's made up of 2 Johnny Griffin originals and 2 Jerome Kern standards. And one of those Jerome Kern standards, The Way You Look Tonight, is just a proverbial sword fight, blazing sword fight between the 3 tenor players, and it's hair-raising, and it just, you just gotta shake your head at it. It's amazing, and I want to step back for a second and give you a little taste of The Way You Look Tonight. Yeah, you do have to handle this album with extreme care because at any moment it could go off and you will lose some fingers because it's that hot and that explosive. It's the 2011 Media Matters reissue of a 1957 Blue Note release by the great Chicago tenor man Johnny Griffin. Well, next up is a jazz artist and album that Paul indicated that he was quite fond of. The album title is La Sombra by Chip Wickham. It's a 2017 release on the Love Monk label. Now, Chip Wickham is a British reed man and flautist who makes absolutely no bones about his influences. And on this album, he creates a really cool pastiche that honors his musical heroes and a time and a place where they thrived. So he firmly plants a flag in 1960s jazz with a little soul, a little spiritual, a little Brubeck, a little Coltrane, and a whole lot of Yusef Lateef and Harold McNair. Harold McNair? Yeah, well, Harold McNair was a Jamaican-born saxophonist and flautist that set up shop in Britain in the mid to late 60s, early 70s, primarily as a studio musician, but he did put out a handful of records that are incredibly hard to come by. I mean, I became aware of him through Ginger Baker's Air Force, but McNair is just a pretty immense influence on Chip Wickham and his compositions, which, you know, really do harken back to a less complex time in jazz. Again, you know, kind of planted in the 1960s, you know, but very, very cool. And let me step back for a second so you can sample a little bit more of Chip Wickham. Yeah, so when I listen to this album, I get the feeling of listening to a really smart, really cool soundtrack from a late 1960s film. Quite enjoyable and very non-threatening. Chip Wickham, La Sombra, on the Love Monk label from 2017. Now that was not all that was in the package. Paul also included some NASA swag. Some of you know that Paul works for NASA. A couple stickers and a mission patch. But more importantly, and the real stunner of the entire package, and that's over the music, is this little medallion encased in plastic. It's commemorating the 40th anniversary of the final Apollo mission, Apollo 17, the last manned mission to the moon. And on the back here it states, this medallion contains metal flown to the moon on Apollo missions. Paul, you have no idea what this means to me, and I'm about to tell you. When I was a kid, my heroes of heroes were the original 7 Mercury astronauts. Yes, I'm still hauling around my family's 1959 copy of Life magazine with a featured article. I mean, it just didn't get any more heroic than those guys. Another book I've been hauling around my entire life is called Into Space with the Astronauts. Had this ever since I was like 7 years old. Just can't let go of it. It's so meaningful. And this is beyond meaningful to me. And so, Paul, man, you so squarely hit the nail on the head. And I thank you from the bottom of my heart. Truly. Well, as I stated earlier, the remainder of the video will feature newer recordings, primarily from 2017, but we'll actually start here with a 2016 release on the Pi Recordings label from Henry Threadgill's Zuid. It's called In for a Penny, In for a Pound. And I know that Rodger Coleman showed this a while back, but this album is truly deserving of a little more love, as the 2016 Pulitzer Prize for Music was bestowed upon this great recording. It's a double album, small run, initially featuring Threadgill's autograph in the album jacket, which is like so ridiculously cool. Of course, Henry Threadgill is very ridiculously cool, as he came up through the early halcyon days of the AACM. He was part of the legendary trio Air. And ironically, Zuid now is Threadgill's longest standing group out of his illustrious career. And it's a group that would be very difficult to replace any one member because of the very unique and idiosyncratic musical system that Threadgill has devised. It's a quintet that's made up of Threadgill on alto sax and flutes, Liberty Ellman on guitar, Jose Davila on trombone and tuba. You have Christian Hoffman on cello and violin, and Elliot Kavi on drums and percussion. As I said, it would be nearly impossible to swap anybody out, as Threadgill has devised a system that seamlessly combines compositional modules with group improvisation, and these modules are just very interchangeable and can restructure them. I kind of look at it like Rubik's Cube music in a way, and it's also very, very democratic. In this recording, different compositions will have one of the group's members a little bit more out front. Again, it's very, very democratic, so let me step back for a moment and let you sample a cut with cellist Christian Hoffman, who is getting his due. Yeah, some really unique stuff from a living master who continues to evolve and experiment and tinker. Henry Threadgill and Zuid, In for a Penny, In for a Pound, from 2016 on the Pi Recordings label. Well, I mentioned Rodger Coleman earlier, and as many of you are aware, Rodger and I met up in Nashville recently, and it was an incredible time, a very inspirational time and afterthought. I will link you to Rodger's video where he spoke quite eloquently and in great detail about our meeting. So if you haven't seen that, check that out. We did do a little shopping, and we did a lot of talking about music and life. It was very open, very revealing. It was very cool. Very cool. Rodger also bestowed upon me a copy of his latest musical endeavor with his buddy Sam Bird. And I gotta say that I am digging this a lot. I've played it a number of times. There are 2 long improvisational cuts. Rodger is employing some of his new synthesizer modules. There's also guitar, so it's a lot more layered than some of his earlier efforts, which are great as well, where it's mostly keyboard and drums and percussion. But with the addition of the new sounds, it's really elevated things. In my mind, I'm really impressed. If you haven't picked one of these up, I do encourage you to. Yes, I know it's heresy because it's on a CD, but I totally understand it, that the tracks are long enough that you'd have to split them, and it just blows the whole vibe. So CD it is, CD it shall be, and it's really wonderful stuff. It truly is. And it was also wonderful to meet you, Rodger. And as Rodger said in his video, we were hoping to do it again, whether it's here in the Kansas City area or back in Nashville, because it was just that freaking cool. Well, speaking of pure improvisation, I offer up a terrific session that I'm quite fond of. It was recorded in a barn in upstate New York in 2015 with the pianist Tola McDonough, the legendary Pauline Oliveros on her Roland V accordion, and Nels Cline of Wilco fame on his e-guitar. The LP is called Molecular Affinity. It's on Roratoria, which is a real cool small record label from Minneapolis, Minnesota. And this features one of Pauline Oliveros' later recordings before she passed away. And if you're not familiar with Pauline Oliveros, I do encourage you to look into her, as she is one of the legendary pioneers of both electronic and experimental music. She developed a musical theory called sonic awareness, which in a nutshell is just being aware of all sounds, both environmental and musical, that surround you at all times. And the trio of musicians here are definitely immersed in employing that theory, as they are intently and greatly listening to one another. They are definitely not working independent of each other. With the inclusion of Oliveros's V accordion and Nels Cline's e-guitar, they're able to conjure up a variety of sounds, and it's always fascinating to hear people who are just acutely on guard and making music at the moment that is making sense and is telling a story of sorts. There are 2 sidelong cuts on this album, and they tend to play in a darker, more contemplative space. And when I do listen to this, I hear something different each time, which makes this a very valuable record to me in my collection. So let us step back for a second and hear a little bit of this sonic awareness. Yeah, I mean, if you're up for the challenge of mental rewiring and stepping away from traditional melody and rhythm and into a more organic pasture of sound, then Molecular Affinity can be quite rewarding. Again, it's from Tulum McDonough, Pauline Oliveros, and Nels Klein, Molecular Affinity on Roratorio, from 2016. Well, next up is a highly recommended release from this year, 2017, from Nicole Mitchell. It's called Mandorla Awakening 2, Emerging Worlds. And it's on the FPE Records label, FPE standing for Records for Practically Everyone. And this is easily the most intriguing of today's bunch, as there is so much going on here. There is so much to unpack, both musically and conceptually. It's a double LP, world premiere live recording from the 2015 50th anniversary celebration of the AACM. And Nicole Mitchell is a latter generation AACM member. At one time she was president of the organization, along with being just an incredibly intriguing composer and simply just one of the best flautists going today. This piece features her Black Earth Ensemble, and they're exploring a science fiction story that Nicole Mitchell wrote about people escaping a decaying society for an egalitarian island called Mandorla. So Mitchell firmly takes her place in the pantheon of Afrofuturism next to the likes of Sun Ra. I mean, this is an incredibly dense suite that just flows through a variety of musical exploration as they explore the collision of these two different societies. I mean, she seamlessly melds jazz with contemporary classical, with avant rock, with world, with soul, gospel, blues, spoken word. It is quite a stunning feat that she pulls off here. The opening number is called Ego's War, and it features the guitarist Alex Wing of the group, who does this amazing job of channeling Pete Cozy, the guitarist in the great mid-70s Miles Davis groups, as he clearly expresses a world in conflict. Yeah, let's check out a little bit of that. Seems quite fitting for the day-to-day insanity that seems to be emanating from around the globe these days. But as I said, there is a lot to unpack here, and I mean that in a very, very good way. I'll be honest, this album, I could not stop thinking about it for at least a 2-week period. It was just on my mind and on my turntable. And it is something quite special, I feel. So, Nicole Mitchell, Mandorla Awakening 2, Emerging Worlds, on the FPE Records label from 2017. Well, let's jump from the amazingly dense and layered into the lush and minimal work from Italian minimalist Giusto Pio and his recording Motore Immobile. This is a 2017 reissue on the Soave label from a 1979 release on the Cramps label, and an incredibly impossible and rare record to ever get your hands on. So in reality, this is more like a new issue. And it is something different. It's something to behold, and it's interesting to hold this up against, say, the American minimalism of the time from the likes of Philip Glass or Steve Reich, where they're kind of after a somewhat colder, focused version of perfection, where Pio is after something much warmer, much more floating, more ambient. I mean, this album is like floating on a gentle stream of honey as you completely lose track of time. I mean, this is amazingly humanistic and spiritual for the very little that is going on here. There are two side-long tracks. On side one, it features the drone of two church organs along with the hum of human voice and Giusto Pio's violin. And the second side gets even more sparse, where it's just organ and piano. So there is this organ drone that gets interrupted with these bursts, these musical bursts from the piano that are just, eye-opening. Incredible statements that, just suddenly hit you over the head like a hammer. It's quite impressive, quite effective stuff. Let's take a little listen to this piece from side two with the organ and the piano and see if you can pick up what I'm talking about. I tell you, if you give this music a chance to wash over you, or better yet, immerse yourself in it, you will be rewarded with a mini vacation away from the realities of all that precedes it. Yeah. Giusto Pio, Motore Immobile, 2017 reissue on the Soave label from a 1979 release on the Cramps label. How about we end with some genius and a recently discovered and issued session from 1959 from the iconoclastic composer, pianist, and band leader Thelonious Monk. I mean, he is part bebop, he's part hard bop, part post bop, and through it all he created an incredibly unique body of work that is just amazingly abstract, rhythmic, disjointed, angular, witty, beautiful, and all of it is extremely palatable. If this looks familiar to anyone, this is a peel-off from a record store day release earlier in the year, a 2-record set from a session, as I said, from 1959 for a soundtrack recording for a French film, Dangerous Liaisons. But this is newly released as a single LP where they essentially peeled off the first disc, which is the primary recording. The second disc has some alternate takes, outtakes, things like that, which me personally I'm not as interested in. So this is quite perfect for me. This was recorded, in an incredibly stressful time for Thelonious Monk. Prior to this, he had bogusly lost his cabaret card, which prevented him from performing in the clubs in New York City. So he had to embark on a very intense schedule of recording and performing in other cities. Even despite all of this, he was able to come up with some 3 incredible recordings in 1959. First was the Thelonious Monk Orchestra at Town Hall, and then 5 by 5, and Alone in San Francisco, all on the Riverside label. But, due to this hectic schedule, his bipolar disorder was coming more to the forefront. So when he was asked to participate in the soundtrack of the film by Rodger Vadim, he was in no condition to create new music, nor was he in condition to travel to France to record anything. So a session was set up in New York with his regular band at the time, Charlie Rouse on tenor, Sam Jones on bass, and Art Taylor on drums, and they added the French tenor player Barney Willen to the session, which makes this a little unique. But since he couldn't write anything for the film, he took music out of his repertoire and modified it, for the various scenes and the moods that Rodger Vadim was hopeful of getting music for. And it's quite interesting to hear how Monk molds these known pieces. Some are more brisk, some are more somber. But let's check out a little bit of Blue Light and how he's really interested in focusing in on the quirky rhythm within this number. So aside from being some beautiful music, it also comes in a beautiful package. It was mastered by the great Kevin Gray and pressed at QRP, so it sounds fantastic. It has a nice insert included and a delicious laminated thick cardboard tip-on cover, so it's first class all the way. And it is a welcome addition to an already extensive Thelonious Monk collection. And I do recommend it to anyone who is interested in Thelonious Monk's music. Well, that wraps up this vinyl orgy. And I want to thank new subscribers over the past few months, and of course the old guard that's hanging in there. And you know what to do now. Comment away, please. I love the comments down below. I love the discussions that we get going. It's really some good stuff. So other than that, you know what to do. Do what you can to keep it in the groove, and I'll see you next time.